He collapsed after his wife divorced him to marry his boss. Right there on the cold apartment floor he once built with love, a man who gave her everything lay gasping for breath, while the woman he'd sacrificed his dreams for walked away in designer heels toward another man's empire. Noah Callahan, the quiet software engineer everyone called too simple, never imagined the woman who once swore she'd love him forever would trade his kindness for her boss's wealth. But when Rachel signed those papers and left, the heartbreak didn't just break him, it stopped his heart. In the silence that followed, his loyal maid Emily, trembling and desperate to save him, dialed a random number that would change every life tied to that betrayal. But who exactly picked up that call? Why did fate choose that number? And what would Noah do days later that no one, not even the wife who broke him, could ever see coming? The first time Noah Callahan saw Rachel Monroe, she was laughing beneath the broken neon light of a campus diner, a spark of warmth in a tired world. He'd been tutoring freshmen in computer science for cash. She was a business major rehearsing a marketing pitch. She teased him for his outdated laptop, and he told her gently that outdated doesn't mean useless. That single sentence, light and casual, would become the philosophy of his life, and the irony that later destroyed it. Noah was raised in Oklahoma by a mother who cleaned offices at night. Her palms were cracked from bleach, her smile gentle even when exhaustion bent her shoulders. She used to whisper, "Promise me, no woman near you will ever work this hard again." He promised. That vow lived like a pulse in his chest through every decision he made. Rachel grew up different middle-class comfort, but a mother who left after an affair. At 14, she learned that attention could replace love. Ambition became her armor. She liked the idea of Noah's calm devotion, the way he looked at her as if the world were stable. But stability, for Rachel, was never enough. She craved witness. They married young, in a small church outside Austin. Noah's vows were long, overflowing with promises to protect her, to build a life from nothing. Hers were brief and elegant. She wore borrowed pearls and thought, just for a moment, that she could live a simple life. At the reception, a friend joked about Noah's bus rides to work. Rachel laughed instead of defending him. A hairline crack, invisible to everyone, began forming right there. Years passed. Noah built a modest career as a software engineer, long nights coding in their two-bedroom house while Rachel scrolled through social media feeds filled with luxury weddings and penthouses. He still brought her handwritten notes. She left them unread in drawers. When he declined a risky startup offer to choose a safer salary, "So we won't ever worry about bills," she smiled, but something inside her cooled. Emily Rhodes arrived 3 years later, a quiet maid recommended by a neighbor. She moved through their home like air, folding clothes, washing dishes, never intruding. Noah treated her kindly. Rachel barely saw her. Emily noticed how the laughter in the house had changed, how Noah's voice grew smaller each evening, how Rachel's perfume smelled sharper, more performative. Then came Warren Langford, billionaire CEO, magnetic, charming, newly divorced. Rachel met him through a corporate retreat. He noticed her ring and ignored it. She noticed his watch and didn't. What began as admiration became messages, dinners, silence after midnight. Noah sensed it, the cold phone screen flipped face down, the new perfume, the empty side of the bed, but blamed himself for not being enough. One night, when he fixed the leaking sink while Rachel prepared for another business dinner, Emily watched him from the hallway, water glistening on his hands, exhaustion in his eyes. "Everything fine," he said softly, though no one had asked. Outside, thunder gathered over Austin, the kind that warns of storms too wide to run from. Rachel returned home late that night, perfume still clinging to her like proof of another life. She found Noah asleep on the couch, laptop open beside him, lines of code glowing faintly across the screen. The lamplight traced the exhaustion in his face, the face of a man still dreaming of a future that had already ended for her. She watched him for a long moment, then sighed, slipped off her heels, and walked past without covering him with the blanket Emily had left folded on the armrest. "Upstairs," she texted Warren. "He's asleep. Tomorrow, I'll tell him." Morning came heavy. The air in the kitchen carried that stale quiet of words not yet said. Emily poured coffee, her hands trembling as she sensed something breaking. Rachel sat across from Noah, her expression polished, professional, as if conducting a meeting instead of ending a marriage. "I filed the papers yesterday," she said, her voice flat. "I'm done living small, Noah." He looked up slowly, unsure if he'd heard her right. "Papers? Divorce," she replied, not flinching. "You'll be fine. You always survive things." For a second, the world fell out from under him. His chest tightened, breath catching somewhere between disbelief and pain. He tried to stand, to speak, to ask why, but the room blurred. The coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered against the floor as his knees buckled. Emily screamed his name as he hit the tiles, eyes rolling back, the sound of his body against the floor louder than any argument. Rachel froze. For a heartbeat she thought he was faking, that this was another one of his soft, dramatic ways to make her stay. But when his body went still, she stepped backward, whispering, "Oh my God," under her breath. Emily was already kneeling, pressing trembling fingers to his neck, shouting for help. Rachel's phone buzzed, Warren calling. She looked at the screen, then at Noah lying unconscious at her feet, and for the first time, shame flickered across her face. She turned away, answering in a low voice, "I'll call you later." Emily's hands shook. "He's not breathing right," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. She snatched his phone from the table, scrolling desperately through contacts, no emergency number, no family. Her thumb landed on a recent call labeled Dr. Mason Everett. She didn't think, she just dialed. The call connected after 2 rings. "Hello?" a man's voice said. "Please, please, he's not breathing," Emily shouted. "Mr. Callahan, he's collapsed." Within minutes, Mason Everett was racing across Austin, heart pounding as old memories resurfaced: college nights, Noah's quiet laughter, the blood he once donated to save Mason's life years ago. The random call that fate had dialed was no accident. It was destiny repaying a debt. Rachel stood by the kitchen window, watching the ambulance lights flicker red against the morning walls. She clutched her robe tighter, whispering, "This isn't how it was supposed to go." Emily rode in the ambulance, holding Noah's hand the whole way. His pulse fluttered faintly beneath her fingers, weak but alive. As the siren wailed through the city, she looked down at him and whispered, "You're not done yet, sir." Not yet. At the hospital doors, Mason was already waiting, and when he saw who lay on the stretcher, his eyes filled with a mix of shock and grim purpose. "Get him in," he said. "We're not losing him today." Back at the apartment, Rachel stood alone, surrounded by silence and the shards of a broken coffee cup. Her reflection warped in the spill, spreading across the floor like a stain she couldn't wipe clean. When Noah opened his eyes, the world felt muffled, like sound moving through water. The hospital, ceiling above him, was white and endless. Tubes ran into his arm. His chest ached, but the ache wasn't physical. It was the hollow kind that came when something sacred had broken too completely to mend. He turned his head slowly. Through the faint hum of machines, he saw Emily dozing in a chair near the bed, still in her work clothes, her hair untidy, face marked with the worry of sleepless nights. On the table beside her sat a paper cup of cold coffee and his wedding ring, wrapped in tissue. For a moment, he stared at it, his breath catching in quiet disbelief. Mason Everett walked in, still in scrubs, his expression lined with both relief and questions. "You gave us a scare, brother," he said softly. "If your maid hadn't called, you wouldn't be here." Noah tried to speak, but his throat felt raw. He managed a hoarse whisper, "Rachel, where is she?" Mason's silence was its own answer. He lowered his gaze. "She came for a while," he said carefully. "Then she left. Said she had somewhere to be." Somewhere to be, 2 words sharp enough to reopen every wound. Noah looked at the clock on the wall. It was past noon. Outside his window, the Austin skyline glimmered in late sun, alive and oblivious. Meanwhile, Rachel stood in front of flashing cameras at the Langford Dynamics headquarters. Dressed in a sleek cream suit and diamond earrings, she smiled for reporters beside Warren Langford, who kept a proprietary hand at her waist. The headline scrolling across entertainment news read, "Billionaire CEO engaged to former employee after helping her through divorce." She told herself this was her victory, finally stepping into the life she deserved. Yet when the cameras went off, Warren walked ahead without waiting for her, phone pressed to his ear. Her smile faltered. Back in the hospital, Emily woke to the sound of Noah's voice, low and tired. "You stayed," he said, more a statement than a question. She nodded quickly, standing up. I couldn't leave. You, you stopped breathing, sir. I thought. Her voice broke. He gave a faint, grateful smile. Thank you, Emily. You called the right number. I just pressed one, she said. Didn't even know who it was. He turned his face toward the window. Then maybe some mistakes are blessings. Mason returned later that evening, carrying test results and something else, a folded envelope. He placed it on the bedside table. You should look at this when you're stronger, he said. And Noah, take it from a man who's been where you are. Don't waste your survival proving anything to anyone. Use it to start over. Noah nodded weakly, eyes drifting to the envelope but not opening it yet. As night fell, the lights dimmed, and Emily whispered good night before leaving to fetch food. Alone, Noah stared at his ring, wrapped in tissue. He thought of Rachel's last look, her perfume fading behind ambulance sirens, her voice cold and final. Something inside him hardened not into hatred but into resolve. The next morning, when nurses came in, they found him sitting up, eyes clear. He asked for a notepad. On the first page, he wrote 2 words that would soon rebuild his entire future. Begin again. Outside the hospital, news vans passed by showing Rachel and Warren's photo on loop. But inside, in quiet defiance, a man once broken had already started writing the blueprint for his resurrection. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and cheap perfume. Reporters clustered outside like vultures waiting for a story to bleed. Inside, Noah sat alone at the front bench, a pale shadow in a dark suit borrowed from Mason. His eyes were calm, almost too calm, the way a man looks when he's already drowned once and isn't afraid of water anymore. Across the aisle, Rachel Callahan adjusted her cream blazer, her diamond earrings flashing under the fluorescent lights. Warren Langford sat behind her, sunglasses perched low, his expression carved from arrogance and boredom. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Rachel didn't look at Noah. She looked at her nails. Her lawyer began his argument with a rehearsed sigh, painting her as a woman who suffered in a stagnant marriage to a man incapable of ambition. Each sentence was a knife disguised as concern. The audience scribbled notes. Noah said nothing, hands folded neatly on the table. Rachel was called to speak. She stood with the poise of someone performing for cameras that weren't there. Noah is a good man, she began, her tone laced with pity. But kindness isn't enough to build a life. I needed a partner who could dream bigger. Warren, he understands that world, the courtroom murmured. Noah's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering to object, but he raised a hand. Let her finish. Rachel's voice trembled only once, on the word dreams. For a moment, she almost looked sorry, but then Warren's phone vibrated, and she glanced back at him. The moment vanished. When it was Noah's turn, he rose slowly. The judge watched him, perhaps expecting an outburst. Instead, he spoke softly, every word measured. There's nothing to defend, he said. If she wants freedom, she already has it. I won't beg someone to stay where love has left. His gaze found Rachel's for the first time. But someday, truth will visit all of us, and when it does, I hope it's gentle with you. A silence heavier than verdicts filled the room. The judge cleared her throat, breaking it. Given the uncontested filing, the court grants the divorce. Her gavel fell, final as thunder. Outside, cameras flashed as Rachel and Warren stepped into the sunlight. She held his arm, smiling for the swarm of lenses. A journalist shouted, Mrs. Callahan, is it true your new fiancé hired your ex-husband? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Rachel smiled wider. Ex-husband? She corrected. And no, he's moving on in his own way, I'm sure. That line became a headline before sunset. Poor husband left behind. The Callahan divorce. Social media feasted on it. Memes sprouted overnight, showing Noah's hospital photo beside Warren's yacht pictures. Back in his apartment, Noah sat in silence while Emily unpacked groceries. The floor was bare, the walls stripped of photos. Rachel once insisted on framing. Emily glanced at him, afraid to speak. They took everything, she said softly. Noah shook his head. No, they took my distractions. She studied him, this man who refused to break the way others expected. His calm frightened her more than rage would have. That night, as the city glowed outside, he opened the envelope Mason had left. Inside were 3 documents: a patent filing bearing his forged signature, a company memo with his stolen code, and a list of shell accounts under Warren Langford's name. Evidence. Proof. Destiny disguised as paperwork. Noah stared at the papers until dawn, every heartbeat slow and deliberate. The humiliation was done. The rebuild had begun. The morning after the headlines died down, Noah stepped out into the cool Austin air for the first time in weeks. He walked past the bakery where he used to buy Rachel's favorite croissants, and past the park bench where they once planned their future. Every familiar place felt smaller now. Stripped of illusion, he no longer flinched at the whispers that followed him. He heard them the way one hears distant thunder, present but powerless. He began showing up at his old co-working space again, renting the cheapest desk by the window. He worked quietly, rebuilding fragments of his stolen program from memory. Each line of code became a heartbeat, each keystroke a vow. The kindness in him hadn't died, it had simply hardened into precision. He wasn't working to prove Rachel wrong. He was working to understand how she'd fooled him so completely. Emily brought lunch most days. She would leave it by his desk, sometimes catching him staring out the window, his reflection pale in the glass. "You need rest," she'd say softly. He'd smile, tired but grateful. Rest is for people done fighting. At night he read books on corporate law, finance, cybersecurity. He took notes the way soldiers sharpen knives. What Rachel and Warren never understood was that quiet men do their best work in silence. Meanwhile, Rachel's new life glittered. Warren had moved her into a penthouse overlooking the lake. There were designer clothes, gala invitations, champagne brunches. She'd traded love for luxury and convinced herself it was an upgrade. But the higher she climbed, the lonelier it felt. Warren's affection came in performance-sized doses, grand gestures in public, indifference in private. At one charity event, Rachel overheard investors whispering that she was the CEO's pet project. The laughter stung. When she confronted Warren later, he chuckled. "Ignore gossip. They just envy what you have." She wanted to believe him, but his eyes were already back on his phone, scrolling through messages from another woman on the board. That night, Rachel stood on the balcony, wine glass trembling. Down below, the city pulsed with life that didn't care who she was. For the first time, she wondered if she'd miscalculated, if she'd built her victory on sand. Across town, Noah met with Mason in a quiet diner. Mason slid a flash drive across the table. "This is everything I could dig up on Langford Dynamics. Shell companies, offshore accounts, internal memos. You might want to look before someone else does." Noah pocketed it without a word. His calm unnerved Mason. "What are you planning, Noah?" "Nothing impulsive," Noah said. "Just correction." Mason studied him. "You're different." Noah looked up, a faint smile touching his lips. "No, I'm finally myself." Later that week, Emily found him rearranging old notes in the living room, papers spread like battle plans. "Sir, what are you doing?" she asked. "Building something that can't be stolen," he replied quietly. "Not again." Outside, a summer storm gathered, thunder rolling through the Austin sky, the same sound that had once marked his collapse now echoing the rhythm of a man rising again. Weeks bled into months, and the city moved on, but Noah did not. His days were precise, now coffee at dawn, code by noon, research until midnight. Every part of him that once bent for love had straightened into focus. He didn't talk about revenge. He built it line by line, disguised as progress. He began with small calls to people who still respected him, former colleagues who'd left Langford Dynamics feeling underpaid and unseen. "I'm working on something cleaner," he told them. "Something honest." They didn't need convincing. One by one, they joined quietly, leaving Warren's company bleeding talent without realizing it yet. Mason became his silent advisor, reviewing contracts late at night. Evelyn Crane, Warren's ex-wife, reached out next. She'd seen the news about Noah's collapse and recognized the same wound in him that Warren had once carved into her life. Their first meeting was in an empty cafe after closing hours. Evelyn placed a folder on the table, filled with documents she'd collected during her divorce, proof of Warren's offshore fraud, and a list of employees he had cheated. "He thinks power makes him untouchable," she said, her tone low, steady. "You'll show him it doesn't." Noah studied the pages without blinking. "He took everything from me," he said, voice quiet but sharp. "I'll return the favor systematically." Emily noticed the change in him. He moved with silent purpose now, his posture taller, his eyes clearer. Yet beneath the calm, there was still the same man who thanked her after every meal, who asked if she'd eaten, who repaired her old laptop just because he could. The world had humiliated him, but it hadn't corrupted him. Meanwhile, Rachel's life with Warren glittered on the surface, but cracked underneath. At dinners, she laughed too loudly, smiled too long. She could feel the pity in people's eyes now. They saw her not as a woman who rose, but as one who was kept. Warren began working later hours, leaving her to dine alone in rooms filled with everything money could buy except warmth. One evening, she overheard Warren on a call. His voice, once soft with her, was sharp, irritated. "I don't care what it costs. Fix the stock issue, and make sure the press doesn't link our new patent to that old freelancer's algorithm." That phrase, "old freelancer's algorithm," stuck in her chest. She knew what it meant. She knew whose code it was. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She went through Warren's laptop, curiosity clawing at guilt. There it was, Noah's original coding blueprint, registered under Langford Dynamics. She stared at it, realizing the depth of Warren's deception. He hadn't just taken her husband's wife, he'd stolen his life's work. She closed the laptop, hands shaking. For the first time, she saw Warren not as savior, but as mirror everything she had become: charming, selfish, hollow. Across the city, Noah sat at his desk, analyzing files Evelyn had sent. His fingers paused on one document, the same fraudulent patent Rachel had just seen. A slow, almost merciful smile crossed his face. In that moment, miles apart, both of them understood the same truth. Warren Langford had built his empire on Noah Callahan's silence, and that silence was about to end. The first strike came so quietly that no one at Langford Dynamics noticed until it was too late. On a Monday morning, 3 senior engineers resigned within an hour of each other. By Wednesday, 5 more followed. Warren stormed through the glass halls of his headquarters, barking orders, demanding answers. His assistant stammered that the resignations cited better offers from a startup called Calitech Systems. Warren frowned. He had never heard of it. Across the city, Noah watched the news feeds flicker with headlines about Langford's sudden talent drain. He sat at a small desk in a rented loft, laptop open, Emily quietly filing papers behind him. There was no gloating, only that same calm focus. "That's step 1, he murmured. "Make them think they're bleeding by accident." Emily set down a mug of coffee. "You think he knows it's you?" "He will," Noah said. "But not yet." He spent nights building Calitech's public face, a shell company that looked new but felt trustworthy, designed to lure investors and staff who craved transparency. Evelyn handled introductions, using her society contacts to whisper that the firm was backed by a silent genius, burned by corporate greed. Within a month, money and talent began flowing toward Noah's new empire. Meanwhile, Warren grew restless. Stock prices dipped 3%, nothing catastrophic, but enough to bruise his ego. Rachel tried to soothe him with the same charm she once used on Noah, but Warren wasn't a man who sought comfort, he sought control. "I want names," he told his legal team. "Find out who's stealing from me." Rachel sat quietly beside him, pretending to read emails, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The copy of Noah's patent still haunted her. She'd deleted it from Warren's computer, yet the image lingered in her mind, proof that she'd helped destroy a man who never wronged her. That night, as Warren showered, she opened her phone and searched Calitech Systems. When she saw the address listed in a modest Austin building, her chest tightened. It was near the diner where she and Noah used to meet after work. Coincidence, she told herself. Still, she couldn't look away from the name. At the loft, Emily returned from the grocery store to find Noah staring at a spreadsheet full of Langford's offshore transfers. "You're not just building a company," she said softly. "You're building a mirror for him to fall into." He looked up, surprised by her words. "A mirror?" "Yes," she said. "So he can finally see himself." Warren called an emergency board meeting to address the Calitech problem. He stood before his executives, chest puffed, voice sharp. "Find their founder. Destroy them before they grow." But one board member, Evelyn's old ally, raised an eyebrow. "Maybe we should partner instead," he suggested. "They seem promising," the room murmured. Warren's jaw tightened. He didn't know that the proposal had come straight from Noah's planted whisper, a trap disguised as opportunity. That night, Warren poured himself a drink, staring at the city skyline. "Whoever you are," he muttered, "you'll regret crossing me." Miles away, Noah closed his laptop and whispered to himself, "No, Warren. You'll regret underestimating silence." The storm had begun, and none of them, not Rachel, not Warren, not the world that mocked him, could see how carefully it had been planned. Langford Dynamics began to decay from the inside like a mansion built on rot. It didn't happen in an explosion, it happened in whispers, missing emails, and vanishing trust. Calitech was everywhere now, in investor conversations, in trade blogs, in private chats between disillusioned executives. No one knew who ran it, only that their systems worked better, faster, cleaner. Warren Langford walked through his glass offices like a man patrolling an invisible fire. He barked at assistants, scolded managers, demanded updates from PR. Every time he saw a Calitech headline, his jaw tightened. Rachel watched him from across their penthouse kitchen as he poured another drink. Tie loosened, face tense. "You're drinking too much," she said carefully. He turned, smirked. "And you're asking too many questions." Rachel froze. There was something in his tone, a familiarity she remembered from Noah's exhaustion years before, the kind that meant he'd stop listening. "I'm just saying," she murmured. "Maybe you should rest." "Rest?" He laughed, bitter. "You rest when you've earned the world. I'm not done owning it." He left her standing there, the echo of his footsteps louder than his words. That night, Rachel lay awake beside him, eyes fixed on the ceiling. In the faint light, she saw Warren's phone blinking. A message from an unknown number. Problem expanding leak suspected internally. Her pulse raced. He rolled over, muttering in his sleep, and she stared at him, wondering how many lies one man could balance before they all fell. Across the city, Noah met quietly with Evelyn in a dim cafe. She slid a new folder across the table, confidential internal audits, showing falsified financial statements. "He's been cooking his numbers for years," she said. "If this gets out, he'll drown." Noah scanned the pages, nodding slowly. "Good," he said, "but not yet. Let him choke on his success first." Evelyn smiled faintly. "You've learned his language." Emily, meanwhile, was growing uneasy. She watched Noah working later each night, eyes red, hands trembling slightly from caffeine and fury he refused to name. "Sir," she whispered once, "don't let his darkness live in you." He looked at her, tired but kind. "It's not darkness," he said. "It's math. Every lie has a price." Within weeks, Calitech's products began outperforming Langford's in the market. Clients jumped ship. Stockholders panicked. Warren called emergency meetings almost daily, his voice hoarse, his patience thin. Rachel sat in those meetings now, her position as strategic advisor feeling more like camouflage. She noticed the way his executives avoided eye contact, the fear that spread through the room like contagion. Once, she had dreamed of power. Now she saw what it cost to hold it. That evening, she found Warren standing by the window, staring at the city lights reflected in his whiskey. "It's him, isn't it?" she said quietly. "Noah." Warren turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "Why would you say that?" She swallowed. "Because you took everything from him. And because if I were him, I'd come for you too." He stared at her a long moment, then smiled coldly. "Then we'll make sure he never gets the chance." Miles away, Noah closed another report, the faint sound of rain against his window. He looked at Emily and said softly, "The chance has already begun." Rain lashed against the tall glass of Langford Tower, streaking the city lights into ribbons. Inside his penthouse office, Warren paced like a caged animal, phone glued to his ear. "I don't care what it costs," he snapped. "Find out who owns Calitech. I want names, addresses, everything." His assistant's voice trembled through the speaker. "Sir, we traced some shell entities, but they loop back through multiple holding companies in Delaware and..." "Then dig deeper," he roared, slamming the phone down. Papers scattered across his desk. He stared at the financial reports, profits sinking, clients defecting, investors whispering about fraud. His empire was bleeding, and someone was orchestrating it with the precision of a ghost. Rachel stepped in quietly, a towel around her shoulders, her hair damp from the rain. "You're scaring everyone," she said softly. "Even me." He shot her a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't start. Not tonight." She folded her arms. "You said no one could touch you. You said you built something untouchable." "I did," he hissed. until he started. Rachel froze. The word hung in the air like thunder. You mean Noah? Warren turned back to the window, his reflection fractured by lightning. Don't say his name in this house. Rachel's voice trembled. You stole his code, Warren. His idea. Maybe. He spun, hand slamming the table. I made him. His voice cracked under the weight of its own lie. He was nothing until I used what he built. Rachel flinched. For the first time, she saw not confidence but fear in his eyes, the fear of a man watching his empire rot from its foundation. She backed away, whispering, maybe he's just come to collect what's his. Across town, Noah sat in the dim light of his loft, screens glowing before him. He was reading the same reports Warren was holding, only his versions were annotated, dissected, weaponized. Every missing dollar, every forged account, every bribe now cataloged in digital silence. Emily brought him tea, the soft scent of chamomile cutting through the static hum of machines. You should rest, she said. You've been at this for hours. He didn't look up. Rest will come when truth does. She hesitated, watching the determination in his posture, the fire in his stillness. And after truth, he finally met her eyes. After truth, peace. At dawn, he sent an anonymous tip to 3 journalists, a folder containing internal emails, falsified financial statements, and proof of tax evasion, all leading back to Warren Langford. Within 12 hours, the news broke like wildfire. Langford Dynamics, accused of corporate fraud, SEC launches investigation. By afternoon, television screens across America flashed Warren's face beside words like embezzlement and insider trading. His stocks nosedived 20%. Rachel watched the chaos unfold on the living room TV, her hands trembling around a glass of water. What have you done? She whispered, though she already knew. Warren snatched the remote, muttering curses. This isn't over. But it was. Deep down, he could feel it. Every empire he built on deceit was collapsing, and the man he'd underestimated had orchestrated it without ever stepping into the room. Across the city, Noah shut down his laptop and leaned back, the faintest smile flickering. That's step 2, he whispered. Now let's see what truth costs when it's televised. Outside, the morning sky cleared after the storm, but for Warren and Rachel Langford, the rain had only just begun. By the next morning, Warren's name was plastered on every screen from Austin to New York. LAGFORD under investigation scrolled across every news ticker, the story devouring itself on every network. Reporters camped outside his building, cameras flashing through rain as he tried to slip past security. His expensive smile, the one he'd practiced for cameras, was gone. Rachel followed him into the elevator, sunglasses hiding eyes that hadn't slept. You can't hide from this, she said softly. I can bury it, he snapped. Money fixes everything. She looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time, his arrogance now trembling under panic, his empire built on the same lies he'd once whispered into her ear. The charm was gone, and all that remained was fear dressed in a tailored suit. Across the city, Noah arrived early at a downtown law office. Evelyn was waiting, immaculate in gray. Mason joined them, carrying a folder thicker than the first. The SEC has enough to cripple him, Mason said. But if we push now, he'll just play victim. We need him to incriminate himself. Noah nodded, already 2 steps ahead. Then we give him an invitation he can't refuse. That afternoon, Calitech's press release hit every major outlet. Calitech announces strategic acquisition talks with Langford Dynamics. The market froze. Investors scrambled, assuming a merger. Stock prices ticked upward again. Warren's last taste of hope. He called an emergency board meeting within the hour. This is our chance, he told his directors, energy surging back into his voice. We partner with them. We stabilize everything. I'll negotiate it myself. Rachel sat in the back of the room, silent, feeling the irony cut deep. She knew Noah's stillness too well. This felt like him, even through the headlines. It wasn't a merger. It was bait. Later that night, Warren met Calitech's representative at a private suite downtown. The man waiting for him was dressed sharply, calm, and confident. Warren extended a hand. I appreciate you seeing me personally. My company's been through some turbulence. The man smiled faintly. We're aware. He slid a sleek tablet across the table displaying the terms. We're prepared to absorb Langford Dynamics completely on one condition. What condition? That you sign a full disclosure of your company's assets and holdings, the man said. Transparency builds trust. Warren smirked. Of course. He scrolled through the document and signed without reading, eager to save face. When he left, the man gathered the papers and texted one word. Done. In another part of the city, Noah received the message on his phone. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. The signed document would serve as a confession proof of ownership transfer and falsified records in his own handwriting. The trap was now complete. Rachel found Warren hours later, drunk and mumbling victory. We did it, baby. Kalatek's taking us in. We're saved. She stared at him, her heart sinking. You didn't read what you signed, did you? He laughed, waving her off. Details are for lawyers. But in his laughter, she heard the faint sound of something ending like a glass cracking under too much pressure. Across town, Noah stood on his balcony, watching lightning cut through the clouds again. He whispered to himself. He just signed in his own obituary. And somewhere deep inside, for the first time, he almost pitied the man who had stolen everything. Almost. 3 weeks later, Langford Dynamics imploded in broad daylight. The SEC raided its headquarters at dawn, agents swarming the glass tower, collecting hard drives, hauling out boxes of files. News helicopters hovered above, broadcasting the downfall of a man who once called himself untouchable. By noon, every network carried the same image. Warren Langford, in handcuffs, flanked by officers, shouting that it was a misunderstanding. Rachel watched from their penthouse window, frozen, a coffee mug trembling in her hands. The city below was alive with chaos, journalists shouting questions, employees crying as they were escorted out. She backed away slowly, as if distance could undo what she had helped create. Her phone vibrated non-stop calls from friends, reporters, and numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored them all. When Warren returned that evening on bail, his eyes were wild. It's a setup, he shouted, tearing at his tie. Someone forged my signature, twisted the data. This isn't over. Rachel stood near the doorway, silent. She could see the faint outline of his signature on the televised news report. The same signature she'd watched him scribble in that hotel suite 3 weeks ago, the deal he was too proud to read. She whispered, You did this to yourself. He turned on her, eyes burning. You think he's innocent? Your ex? You think this is justice? He grabbed her wrist roughly. This is revenge. Rachel pulled free, trembling. Maybe he earned it. His hand lifted, then fell. For the first time, Warren looked small. I built everything, he said weakly, and he destroyed it with silence. The trial moved fast. Evidence flooded in fake accounts, stolen patents, forged contracts. Every thread led back to Warren's signature. Every lie documented by the very paperwork he once believed protected him. On the morning of the final hearing, the courtroom buzzed with reporters. Rachel sat in the second row, pale and tense. Mason and Evelyn occupied a quiet corner, their faces unreadable. Emily was there too, in a modest navy dress, hands clasped in her lap. When the doors opened, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Noah Callahan walked in, dressed in a charcoal suit, calm, poised, not triumphant. His presence silenced the room. He took a seat beside his lawyer, his eyes steady on the judge, not on Rachel, not on Warren. Warren avoided looking at him until the cross-examination began. When he finally met Noah's gaze, his voice faltered. You framed me. Noah spoke quietly, every word precise. No, I simply stopped protecting you. The judge read the verdict aloud, guilty on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and intellectual property theft. The stolen patents reverted to Noah. Kalatek was officially recognized as the rightful owner of all Langford technologies. Rachel felt her breath catch. It was over. The man she'd left for power was being led away in chains, and the man she'd broken sat before her with the calm of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. As the courtroom emptied, Rachel approached slowly, voice barely above a whisper. Noah. He didn't turn at first. When he did, his expression was unreadable. You wanted freedom, he said softly. Now you have it. Her eyes glistened. Was there ever a part of you that… No, he interrupted gently. Not anymore. He walked past her, Emily falling into step beside him. Outside the courthouse, sunlight cut through the clouds like grace itself. Cameras flashed, but Noah didn't look at them. He only looked ahead, toward the horizon that no longer carried her shadow. Behind him, Rachel sank onto the courthouse steps, watching the man she once humiliated leave as the only one unbroken. The courthouse emptied. Slowly, the noise fading into the low hum of afternoon traffic. Noah walked down the marble steps without haste, every movement measured, as if he'd rehearsed this moment in silence 1,000 times. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, reporters shouting his name, "Mr. Callahan, how does it feel to win?" He said nothing. Emily was beside him, her hand brushing his sleeve, grounding him. Her quiet presence did what applause never could. It kept him human. He didn't look back at the building where he'd just ended years of deceit, but Rachel did. She stood at the top of the steps, face pale, mascara blurred by tears. She couldn't stop anymore. The woman who once walked out of a marriage into a penthouse now watched her new world crumble in slow motion. Warren was gone. Her reputation was in ruins, and the faces around her, the same faces that once smiled at her galas, now turned away with silent disgust. She wanted to call out to Noah, to tell him she was sorry, that she hadn't known how empty power would feel, but the words died on her tongue. The distance between them wasn't measured in feet anymore. It was measured in choices. That night, the city glowed gold beneath the rain. Noah sat on the balcony of his loft, watching the skyline flicker. The wind carried faint echoes of traffic, sirens, laughter, the living sound of a city that had watched him fall and rise again. Emily placed a blanket over his shoulders and set down a cup of tea. "You should feel proud," she said softly. "You won." He looked at her, eyes calm but unreadable. "No," he said. "Justice won. I just stopped standing in its way." She smiled faintly. "That's still a win." He studied her, the woman who had seen him broken on the floor, who had called a random number and saved his life without even knowing why. Her hair was caught in the wind, her eyes tired but kind. For the first time since his collapse, he felt something like peace move through him. The next morning, news anchors dissected every detail of the trial. Former Maid seen leaving courthouse with tech billionaire Noah Callahan. Social media buzzed with speculation, but Noah ignored it all. He spent the day finalizing Calitech's new division, a foundation dedicated to ethical innovation. Its mission was simple: rebuild trust where greed had poisoned it. Emily became its first director. The staff adored her humility, her clear sense of purpose. She spoke rarely in meetings, but when she did, people listened. Noah watched from his office window, realizing that she wasn't just part of his redemption, she was his redemption. That evening, as they locked up, he said quietly, "You were right that night, when you called it a mirror." She tilted her head. "A mirror?" He nodded. "All of this, it wasn't revenge, it was reflection." He saw himself, and I saw what I'd become trying to stop him. Emily smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time to stop looking at him altogether." Noah took a breath, feeling the weight lift. Maybe it is. Behind them, the city hummed with life again, and the skyline, once a backdrop for betrayal, now looked like home. Months passed quietly, the kind of peace that feels fragile because it follows chaos. Noah had stopped giving interviews. He declined magazine covers, politely ignored invitations from tech summits that once would have crowned him a visionary. He didn't need a crown. His mornings began with coffee and soft jazz. His days spent mentoring young developers in Calitech's training wing. He walked through the same city that once pitied him, and people nodded now with respect rather than curiosity. Emily managed most of the foundation's work. She was calm under pressure, decisive in ways that reminded him of the woman he once hoped Rachel would become. She kept meetings running on time, spoke kindly but firmly, and still left fresh flowers on the office table every Monday. Whenever Noah thanked her, she brushed it off. "You built this, sir," he always answered. "We built this." Rachel's name disappeared from the headlines, replaced by younger scandals. The penthouse was gone. She'd sold her jewelry, then her car, then the house on the lake. She rented a small room above a diner on the edge of the city, working part-time at a women's shelter where no one knew who she was. The mirror above her sink was cracked. She stopped wearing makeup because she couldn't stand the reflection. Sometimes, she caught herself listening for Noah's voice in her dreams. Every time, he turned away before she could speak. One gray afternoon, she walked past a charity event at the City Hall Square. A banner read, Callahan Foundation for Single Mothers. Volunteers in navy shirts handed out care packages. At the center of it all stood Emily, handing a backpack to a shy teenage girl. Rachel froze. The sight of her, the maid she used to ignore, now commanding respect and affection, made Rachel's throat close. She stepped back into the crowd, heart pounding. She wanted to say something, anything, but shame pinned her in place. Across the plaza, Noah was speaking quietly to a journalist about mentorship programs. The light caught his hair, a touch of silver now. His voice carried over the hum of conversation, calm, steady, unhurried. Rachel felt tears fill her eyes. She slipped away unnoticed, whispering to herself, he kept his promise. He still makes the world better. That evening, after the event, Noah and Emily stayed behind to pack boxes. She laughed as he tried to lift too many at once. You never ask for help, she teased. He grinned. Old habits. When they finished, they sat on the steps outside, watching the city lights come on one by one. Emily broke the silence first. Do you ever think about her? He considered the question for a long moment. Sometimes, not with hate anymore, just with distance. She nodded, understanding. You don't look back when you finally arrived. Noah looked at her then. Really looked. The wind lifted her hair, and in her eyes he saw not the maid who once found him broken, but the woman who had rebuilt him quietly, piece by piece. He smiled, the kind that carried years of unspoken gratitude. Emily, he said softly, you ever think about the moment that saved me? The phone call? She asked. He nodded. Maybe fate didn't dial a random number after all. She looked at him, warmth flooding her chest. Maybe fate knew exactly who to call. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where the air felt washed clean after rain. Sunlight slid through the glass walls of the Callahan Foundation, touching the framed photographs of smiling children and single mothers, whose lives had changed because of it. Noah stood by the window, sleeves rolled up, reviewing a proposal for a new community tech hub. Behind him, the faint rhythm of Emily's footsteps filled the stillness as she arranged files on his desk. He turned, watching her move with that effortless grace she never seemed aware of. You know, he said, I still don't understand how you do it. The calm, the order, the kindness that doesn't burn out. Emily smiled, half shy, half teasing. You build code, I build quiet. Same thing, really. He laughed softly. No, you build peace. I just borrowed it. Their eyes met. For a long second, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like a bridge. Outside, volunteers were unloading supplies for the shelter. The sounds of laughter, car doors, and life drifted in. Noah reached into a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box, its corners slightly worn. He hesitated, not from fear, but from the gravity of the moment. Emily, he began quietly, when I think of everything that's happened, all the noise, the collapse, the rebuilding, there's one constant. You. Her breath caught. Noah, you didn't just save my life. You reminded me what life was supposed to feel like. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring, elegant, unpretentious, glinting softly in the light. It's not diamonds or headlines, just truth. And I don't want to start another day without you knowing I choose you not out of gratitude, but because peace has your name on it. Tears shimmered in her eyes. She covered her mouth with her hand, then laughed, a sound like relief. You really think I'll say no after everything? He smiled, sliding the ring onto her finger. I had to ask anyway. You deserve the choice I never gave myself. Outside the building, staff began to notice the scene through the glass wall. Two people who had survived the worst, now standing in quiet joy. Applause broke out spontaneously, echoing through the hallways. That same afternoon, miles away, Rachel sat in the small kitchen of the women's shelter where she volunteered. Her hair was tied back, her hands dusted with flour from baking bread for the residents. The radio on the counter hummed softly with local news. Philanthropist Noah Callahan engaged a longtime colleague, Emily Rhodes. She froze, listening. A small smile curved her lips, tinged with sadness but free of bitterness. He found peace, she whispered. Good. Later, when a young woman at the shelter asked for help learning computer basics, Rachel smiled and said, I used to know someone who taught me patience. I can teach you the same way. In that moment, her redemption didn't come from forgiveness, it came from purpose. That night, Noah and Emily stood on the foundation balcony, city lights glowing beneath them. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, the world below humming like a gentle heartbeat. "This feels different," she whispered. "It should," he said. "It's the first time the story ends where it should have started." The garden behind the Callahan Foundation was dressed in gold that morning, sunlight catching on the dew-soaked roses and pale linen canopies. Guests spoke in hushed, reverent tones as music drifted through the air. A soft piano melody that felt less like a performance and more like gratitude turned into sound. Noah stood at the altar, a vision of calm in a tailored navy suit. His eyes weren't nervous. They were steady, full of quiet knowing. Emily walked toward him, her white dress simple and unadorned, her veil lifted by the breeze. There was no spectacle, no flashes of diamonds, only warmth. She had never looked like someone walking into a fairy tale, she looked like someone walking home. When she reached him, he smiled, and the crowd fell silent. "Dr. Mason Everett officiated, his voice steady with emotion. "Marriage," he said, "is not built on perfect beginnings but on surviving storms and choosing peace after the rain." His words rippled through the crowd, through Noah's chest, through every memory that had shaped him. He took Emily's hands. "You saved me when I didn't think I was worth saving," he said softly. "You turned pain into purpose and silence into music. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making that peace you gave me permanent." Emily blinked back tears. "You were never broken," she whispered. "You were just buried under too much noise. All I did was listen." When the vows were done, they exchanged rings, simple gold bands, reflections of each other. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was heartfelt, like the exhale of a story that had been holding its breath for too long. Afterward, as the guests celebrated under the garden lights, Noah wandered for a moment to the edge of the path, where an older woman waited quietly with a gift bag in her hands. Rachel. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray. Her posture, humble but dignified. "I wasn't sure I should come," she said, her voice trembling. Noah looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It's okay. I just wanted to say thank you," she continued, eyes glassy. "Not for forgiveness, I know that's not mine to ask, but for what you've done for this city, for those people. You became everything I said you couldn't." He studied her face, seeing for the first time not the woman who betrayed him, but the woman life had finally taught humility. "We both became what we had to," he said gently. "I hope you're finding peace too." She smiled faintly. "I'm learning, one day at a time." She handed him the small bag. Inside was a single silver pen. "You always said you'd write your own story someday," she murmured. He nodded, accepting it, his expression soft. "Thank you, Rachel." As she walked away, Emily appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. "Was that her?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yes." And that was the first time it didn't hurt. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then that's real healing." The music swelled again, and they turned back toward the laughter, the lights, the garden filled with people who had witnessed the impossible kindness winning. Years later, the Callahan Foundation's headquarters would display a single inscription on its marble wall, under a sculpted heartbeat line, "For the moments that break us and the people who help us stand again." Every visitor who paused there would feel what Noah once lived. That love built in truth doesn't glitter, it glows. And as the evening faded into starlight, Noah and Emily danced barefoot under the Texas sky, not as a man who won revenge or a woman who rescued him, but as two souls who finally understood that peace, when earned, is the most beautiful ending of all.